You thought space was the final frontier? If you keep going, you'll only find a happy bara. Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. So I've been doing some thinking about the channel, and I think it's about time I did something nice for the viewers. I'm gonna send every single viewer a free Warhammer 40k Leviathan box. I just need your credit card info and the 3 wacky numbers on the back. Aw, come on, jury duty. You wish this was jury duty. Aw, man, jury duty. It's not jury duty. Ugh. You two are about to get a spanking from the long arm of the law. You see, Drake, I have yet to collect the soul that you owe me from. Yeah, from when his dumbass thought he could beat your fiddling contest down in Georgia, we know. But why am I here on trial when I should be at my kid's bar mitzvah? Because he put your soul down as collateral. He what?
Best friends forever?
We're not even friends right now, you stupid. Hey, relax. As a repeat felon, I have rapport with the legal system. Trust me, when I say I could buy off any judge. All rise for the Honorable Judge God. What about that one?
Let's see here. Satan v. Den of the Drake. Alright, great. Let's make this quick. I got an apotheosis game with Jesus.
Oh, don't you worry. This won't take long. Allow me to present the evidence. The defendant signed a contract clearly stating that upon his defeat in a fiddling contest in the Deep South, he would surrender his immortal soul to me. I would now like to surrender the floor to the defendant so we can watch him squirm. Don't worry, little buddy, I got a plan. God, did you?
Judge God?
Judge God, did you say you were playing Apotheosis?
Why, yes. It's my favorite role-playing game. It's the ultimate experience in RPG freedom. No cap, did you know that they just released a new expansion that allows you to play as large-sized creatures?
No way! I really like all the unique races that Apotheosis has on display. Sure, you got your basic elves and dwarves and stuff, but it's also got unique races like the Demmer, and I can even make my character a Redditor by playing as a literal brain-rotting parasite. And that's just the base game. In the sci-fi expansion, there's a whole buffet of unique options like robots and aliens too. Yeah, okay, but what does that have to do with— Ow! Shut up. I agree with the kobold. Apotheosis is cool, but what does it have to do with the dragon's soul?
Order! Order! I swear to me, I have thrown you out of heaven once, and I will do it again! The defendant is pleading his case.
Thank you, Judge God. If only that fiddling contest all those years ago took place in Apotheosis, I could have leveled up based on my actions and experiences, instead of being stuck as a class that sucks at playing the fiddle.
Oh, you poor creature! You mean to tell me that because you weren't playing Apotheosis, you couldn't use the dynamic and classless progression system that lets you improve based on how you play? How could one of my beautiful creatures suffer like this?
Objection, Your Honor, that's literally how it works in real life. He just couldn't be bothered to learn how to play the fiddle before he bet his soul on it.
Objection overruled.
What? Why?
Because I think you're a little bitch, and because I want to talk more about Apotheosis.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Took you long enough. Time to hit him with the finisher. And you guys want to know the best part? No.
Yes!
To celebrate the release of the new expansion, Apotheosis and Apotheosis Sci-Fi Edition are both 50% off. That's right, you can follow the link in my description and purchase both the original smash hit RPG and its sci-fi counterpart for only half of the original price. This sale's only going on for a limited time, so if you've been waiting for a chance to try it out, now is an amazing time to do it. Link is in the description.
Oh, that means it's apotheosis time with Jesus! I'll see you nerds later.
Wait a minute, hold on! You need to deliver a ruling on this case. I've presented clear evidence that...
Me damn it, fine! Not guilty. Later, losers!
But... You can't hide behind your sponsors forever, Drake. I'll get you one day, and your little kobold too. So, what did we learn?
Nothing. See you at work tomorrow.
Wait, who's gonna give me a ride home?
Well, after being forced to give Larry a ride back to his kid's bar mitzvah, I've gone and lost my train of thought. Well, it probably wasn't anything that important. Certainly not as important as the saga I'm gonna narrate. The saga I have for you today stars a player who just wants to channel their inner anime character and have fun wielding a coarse hunk of iron too big to be called a sword, only for their GM to use their godlike power to radiate enough toxic energy that it makes the demon core look like a tanning booth. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG horror stories. Enjoy. This week's saga comes from Reddit user Fingerless Fighter. Part 1 is titled GM Thinks Player with Oversized Sword Ruins His Game World. Takes Finger as Revenge. Background. When I was in college, some friends introduced me to D&D. I instantly got hooked, and the group I was in was fabulous. We played many different systems/campaigns for the 3 to 4 years that we were together. Fast forward to 2016, and I had just graduated and moved to a different state for work. After a few months of settling in, I decided that I wanted to try to find a new group. One day at work, I mentioned that I wanted to get back into D&D to a coworker, Billy, and he mentioned that a game he was GMing just wrapped up. He went on to say that he was interested in starting up a new game with other coworkers, and asked if I would like to join. I accepted as he seemed like a good guy and honestly felt more comfortable playing with coworkers than people I didn't know. After asking around, Billy and myself managed to recruit enough people to start up a game. The story. The group assembled at the GM Billy's apartment for a session 0. We were playing Pathfinder and most of the players were brand new to TTRPGs aside from Billy and his wife. Everyone I didn't already know from work seemed pretty friendly. Billy advised us of his rules, which included things to make sure that players stayed comfortable and weren't thrown into any type of uncomfortable/uncontrollable situation. The main rule, however, was that we could only build characters using the core rulebook, since the majority of the table was new players. Okay, cool, no issues there. I will admit that I was a bit bummed as I already had a class picked out, but no worries. Core keeps things simple. The night ended with Billy handing us pre-built character sheets to run a short combat session. Overall, I left the first meeting feeling pretty positive. The next day, myself and the rest of the players created a group chat to start working on character concepts. I decided that since they were new, I would wait until the others had picked to fill out what was needed. A few days later, everyone had picked, and we ended up with Monk, Cleric, Bard, and Sorcerer, who was Billy's wife. I decided that I was gonna play a fighter. A few days before session 1, I showed Billy my character, a not-so-smart or wise human named Joram, who, with some feet work, wielded an oversized bastard sword. Billy had some concerns. Billy.
So, you're playing a male fighter who is big and dumb? Are you going to be able to RP a man properly?
Me. Yes, I've played male characters before with no issue. Billy.
Just know that I take RP encounters very seriously, and I will hold you to character. Just make sure you keep up the act.
I feel like I should point out that I prefer to play male characters in RPGs even though I'm female. I learned sorta quickly that NPCs/players tend to point out that you're a girl when you play one and want to RP as such. So it's easier just to be a man's man. Shortly after that conversation, we had our first session. Things were good at first. The party met up at some small tavern in some small town. Standard adventurer fare. Joram and Monk became quick friends, with Monk vowing to someday round out some of Joram's sharp edges. The party left town for the big city to complete a quest that was given to them by the mayor. On the way out, the party got into their first ever combat encounter together. And oh dear lord, that first combat encounter. We were ambushed by a band of 4 to 5 highway robbers. Everybody but Monk and Sorcerer rolled horrible initiative, which meant most of the party was taking their turns after the enemies. Monk goes first and rolls his first dice of the game. Critical failure. After rolling from a table, Billy announces that the monk has hit himself below the belt, which causes him to be stunned for, rolls a d4, 4 turns. Monk's player is visibly upset as he knows that he's most likely out for the rest of the encounter. Billy announces that it's the sorcerer's turn and the wife picks up the dice. Quick side note, when I first met Sorcerer during the session 0, she bragged about playing Pathfinder for years with Billy, and specifically mentioned how she only played Sorcerer because she knew the ins and outs of the class super well, and loved the big flashy fire magic. Somehow, with a combination of RP, asking Billy what her spells did, pondering the best location to use area spells, and theory crafting the ideal attack, Sorcerer managed to make her turn last 21 real-world minutes. Sorcerer kept the long trend up and caused a bunch of other issues during the campaign, but that's a story for another time. By the time she decided on the play she wanted to do, most everyone at the table had checked out and were looking up stuff on their phones, including me. Sorcerer's spell managed to deal light damage to one of the enemies, which led to them taking their turns. Finally, it was my turn. Joram swung his big sword and got a lucky roll, dealing max damage and outright one-shotting one of the highwaymen. With another lucky roll, I downed another, as I had the ability that let me attack multiple targets in a turn, so long as they were next to each other. Billy paused the combat and asked for my character sheet. I handed it to him, and a few minutes later, he hands it back and says, "We need to talk." He brings me outside on the balcony and starts lecturing about how power gaming is in poor taste, blah blah blah. I said that I wasn't trying to sneak anything by him or power game, and that I had shown him my exact character earlier in the week, reminding him of the conversation that we had previously. He grumbled a bit and said that oversized bastard swords would look too silly for a normal-sized fighter to wield, and my campaign is too serious to allow it. It ruins the game world that I created. I offered to change weapons before the next session, or roll a new fighter outright, but he declined, saying, "Just don't surprise me with anything else." At this point, I'm uncomfortable looking up at the 6-foot angry GM, and just want to get back inside, so I agree. The next session ended shortly after, with the rest of the highway robbers running away and nobody else getting a combat turn. At this point, I was honestly thinking about leaving the game as the first session left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. But I continued anyway as I didn't want to deal with the awkwardness at work. Plus, I really just wanted to play D&D. During the next session, the party finds a cave and after a few puzzles, happens upon a chest with multiple magic items in it. Monk gets hand wraps that work with his abilities. Sorcerer gets a cloak that gives her an extra spell casting. And the others get magic that helps their class somehow. I find a magic ring. After making a particularly high spellcraft roll, Sorcerer tells me that the ring will improve my chance to hit by 2. This effect just so happens to negate the penalty I take from using an oversized weapon, so I ecstatically put it on. Immediately, my HP starts to drop, as starting from the finger the ring was on, my arm begins to blacken. Billy. It turns out the ring Joram so carelessly put on is cursed. Maybe now he will think twice about equipping random items from a dungeon without getting them properly checked first. Me, out of character. Why would Joram think that the ring was cursed? Not only did everyone else get non-cursed items, but Sorcerer rolled really high as well on that check, and pretty confidently told me that it was safe. I'm not sure what else I could have done there. Billy. This is a powerful cursed item.
Sometimes you can't always trust your party to get things right.
I tried to take the ring off, but of course, it won't come off. Billy tells me that I have 2 minutes of real-world time to find a way to remove it or Joram will die. In the end, everything that everyone tries doesn't work, and we end up cutting off the finger that the ring was on. Billy announces that because I am now missing a finger, I had to take additional penalties to attack, as well as any skills that requires the use of that hand. Can it be restored or healed at a temple? Short answer, no. That cursed ring was so powerful that any attempts would fail for sure. Is there a magic item that's not cursed that I could have from the chest? Nope. I asked him later out of character if there was any solution other than cutting my finger off, but he dodged the question with,
Nothing that your character could think up with his low intelligence.
and that's it. That's how my character lost a finger. Permanently, with no way of recovering it. This post is pretty long, so I'm marking it as multiple parts if anyone is still interested in hearing the rest. There's still plenty of horror to write about from that campaign, including my character forcefully getting recalled due to receiving a 35-year jail sentence in a quite inescapable prison, his replacement getting nerfed to the point of being unplayable, and the sorcerer's multiple meltdowns when she isn't being treated like the main character by the rest of the party. Wow, okay, I guess we know the kind of DM that we're dealing with here. What a dick. So obviously the cursed item thing was bullshit targeting of one of your players. Why? Don't know. Maybe his coffee maker broke that morning or something, but it's probably a lot more likely that it was direct retaliation for the other thing that happened in this part. Let's talk about how this dude stopped the game for everyone and drug OP outside to talk down to her like she was a dumb child. Yeah, buddy, I sure believe you when you say you take roleplay seriously after you grind the entire session to a halt and make everyone just sit at the table twiddling their thumbs just so you can let everyone know how pissed you are at this one chick for rolling one good attack. As a DM myself, I know the feeling of one player in particular steamrolling encounters, and it's not a good one. It makes you feel like you're a bad DM who can't balance the party, and it's kinda tempting to resent the one player who just thought one combination of abilities was cool. However, this is what we call an after the game issue. If a player is being disruptive to the session, that's a right now issue, and you're justified in telling them to knock it off right then and there. But if one of the passenger toilets on the game train gets a little clogged, that's not an excuse for the conductor to derail the bastard. Because all that's gonna do is turn a little tiny in-game problem into an out-of-game one. And you certainly don't try to make an example of the player. Some Reddit DMs might recommend making an example out of problem players, but if you ask me, that's just evidence of a DM thinking that they have a lot more power and worth than they really do. You're a nerd sitting behind what's probably a spray-painted piece of folded cardboard, rolling dice and playing Dollar Tree Lord of the Rings. Calm down there, Stalin. Part 2 is titled GM Still Upset Over Player with Big Sword. Decides to forcefully remove it from the game. This will be part 2 and a continuation of the story I posted the other day about a GM who did not like me playing a male fighter with a large sword, which ended with my PC losing a finger. TLDR. Started playing a Pathfinder homebrew with a few coworkers. GM questions me about playing a male character as a woman, stuns the party monk for a full combat after his first dice roll, complains to me about power gaming and using a non-thematic sword, and takes my PC's finger, making him suffer a permanent debuff on most rolls. As a brief reminder, the important names to remember are Joram, my fighter, Billy, the GM, Monk, and Sorcerer, the GM's wife. Rewinding to a bit before the first session, one thing that Billy wanted for us to do was to create some sort of engaging backstory that could inspire subplots or help with character development down the line. Alright, awesome! Backstories are great. Billy even started a Skype group for the game alongside our work chat, which could be used to help the new players develop their characters' backstories. As some commenters mentioned on my last post, yes, I did end up borrowing from Pathfinder's iconic barbarian when creating the character and backstory. Joram was a fighter from a prestigious clan of warriors who passed down a large bastard sword. The sword was claimed long ago from a great battle with a giant, and was given to the person who won in a contest of strength against the current leader. The warrior who received the sword was exiled from the clan until they got word of the current leader's imminent demise. They would come back and take over as leader of the clan with their new experiences and adventures to guide their future decision-making. Somewhat basic, I know, but I figured it was easy enough to work with and explained why Joram carried around and used a large bastard sword. Picking up where we left off last time, Session 3 or 4 starts and the party ends up finding a secret document that more or less explains the main story hook of the campaign. Orcs, goblins, and some evil kingdom, led by the BBEG of course, are gathering together in massive numbers in an attempt to take over the entire kingdom. Something like that. The party, not really knowing what to do with the newly acquired information, decided to continue to the capital city to deliver the document along with the mayor's request from the starting town to the king. Sorcerer objected to our plan immediately. You see, Sorcerer had played a different campaign with a different party as a different sorcerer in the same homebrew world. The campaign we were playing was 30 or so years after the previous one, so the histories were still very much connected. Sorcerer, out of character, tells us about a village close to the capital city filled with spies, espionage experts, and the shadow ruler of the entire kingdom. She continued by telling us that it wasn't too far away and it would be a much better place to deliver the important documents to. She pretty much repeats the same thing, but in character. Monk asks if we could pause the game for a second and calls out Sorcerer for using knowledge that her character shouldn't know. Monk.
Hi, just out of curiosity, how would your character know this?
Me. Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but didn't we all establish we were new to adventuring? This place sounds pretty secretive for just any old person to know about. Sorcerer.
She would just know about it from a book or something. She's pretty smart and well-read.
Monk.
I'm not quite sure that's how it works, is it?
Billy.
Her previous character from this world is her great-grandmother. She passed it down in a diary, its backstory.
One thing to mention is that Billy was staring daggers into me the entire time we paused the game. I can't remember if he also was staring at Monk, but I don't think he was. We resumed the game and decided to just go with Sorcerer to the super secret town where the Shadow Ruler lives. On the way, we stop at a mountain keep that has been converted into some sort of rest stop with food, drink, and an inn. Bard, Monk, and I decide to have some fun and spend some coin by drinking, dancing, and participating in various other bar activities. A barmaid comes up to me during this and asks if I would like to hang out with her. I politely decline as I'm having fun with my friends. She insists, offering free drinks if I would. Again, I decline and go back to the arm wrestling contest that I'm currently having with the Bard. The other players get some scenes, and I'm told to roll multiple reflex saves, each with an increasing number of penalties for being various stages of drunk, despite having only bought one drink the entire night. Eventually, I fail one of these saves and gasp, "Oh no! I've just accidentally hit the barmaid with my mug, spilling the remainder of my drink all over her Sunday best." Okay. Billy.
She's really mad and starts loudly slinging swears at you. You could see the rage in her eyes.
Joram. I'm incredibly sorry, miss. I must not have been paying attention. My mistake. Billy.
Joram tries to say that, but because he is so drunk, it comes out in slurs and sounds much ruder than intended. Because of the failed reflex, he stumbles while talking and accidentally pushes her down.
This scene went on for a little while with nothing I can do to calm it down. At one point, I even pulled out a few gold to pay for the ruined clothes, hoping that it would smooth it over, but the gold was slapped out of my hand. To be honest, I was a bit confused over the whole thing out of character. Eventually, the scene died down a bit with the manager, owner, maybe, coming over to soothe things over. He even offered to comp our rooms for us. How nice. We accept the offer and headed to bed for the evening. The party wakes up in the morning to a mostly empty inn/tavern and quickly notices that all our stuff, minus the clothes we slept in, is gone. Panicked, we rush to the front where we find the owner who tells us not to worry. Each morning, staff comes by to collect our stuff and washes clothes, polishes items, and sharpens blades. After waiting around a bit, the party gets all their items back. Everything missing was returned good as new and with some temporary bonuses applied. Now, when I say everyone, I mean most everyone except for Joram. Joram got most of his stuff back, but his sword was mysteriously missing. Looking out the window after rolling some perception checks, the party notices that the barmaid from the previous night is smashing Joram's heirloom sword on the stone path leading to the back door of the tavern, with chunks flying off of the blade. The sword almost snapped in half. Before the party could stop him, Joram ran out of the tavern to try to stop his sword from being completely destroyed by yelling, "Hey! What are you doing? Stop it!" The barmaid dropped the sword, spun around, and pulled out a dagger. Me. I yell to the party, "I have a blade raised against me!" and lunge at the barmaid. Billy.
Are you sure you want to do that?
Me. I mean, I've seemingly caught a thief red-handed who not only stole from me, but is actively threatening me with a dagger. I see no reason why I would hold back. Billy.
Alrighty, everyone roll initiative.
A little bit of a side tangent here. I was upset both as a player and as a character. Although I wasn't particularly attached to playing fighter with a large sword, I did feel like I was being punished for something I didn't know I did wrong. I had specifically asked during the first session if Billy wanted me to change my backstory and weapon focus, and he said no to both. If this was some character development based on my backstory, it wasn't, then I might have understood. But even then, I would have liked to have some kind of conversation prior to the session taking place. Something Billy had mentioned to me in a prior session was that I needed to be careful with the weapon and make sure it didn't break, as no one would be able to fix it / craft another for anything shy of 9,000 gold pieces. Losing my sword here would leave me weaponless with a handful of useless feats, at least for a little bit, and really impact my backstory in a negative way. The idea of that alone didn't feel very good and left me with a sour taste in my mouth for my own character. Alright, back to the story. Before combat started, I decided to fight using only my fists. I did have a backup weapon, but my plan was to use non-lethal attacks with the assistance of the party. I was hoping that we could resolve the whole thing quickly and maybe make peace with the barmaid after everything was resolved. I mentioned my intentions to the party. Monk runs up and lets a punch fly, dealing some non-lethal damage. The barmaid takes a swing at me with the dagger and misses. I deal a non-lethal hit. Bard sings a song, and then Sorcerer takes her turn. Sorcerer.
I cast Glue Seal on Joram.
Me. What? Why? Sorcerer.
Because I can tell that he's really upset, and there must be a way to solve this without violence.
Me. She drew a knife on me. Sorcerer.
Well, you did charge her out of nowhere in a threatening manner.
Billy.
Alright, roll a reflex.
I fail, and fail the subsequent check to break free from being glued to the floor in place. Billy decides that combat is over by having the ragtag team of watchmen come over to investigate the issue. They place me, and only me, under arrest while they get everyone else's statements. Most of the party tells the same story about the events of the previous night and the current situation, except for the sorcerer, who adds in that I suddenly and for no good reason rushed the poor girl. One of the watchmen grabbed my now beat-up sword from the ground and hold it in front of me.
Is this what all the fuss was about?
He then snaps it in half by beating it against the wall. I get hauled away, waiting to be judged for my crimes at the nearest town. The game ends, and I, along with most of the other players, are a bit quiet. Billy picks up on how upset I am and asks to speak with me outside. I follow, bringing Monk with me. We talked for a bit about the whole situation, and I expressed my displeasure with some of the in-game events and being singled out randomly. Billy explains that he is really not purposefully trying to target me in or out of game, and admits that the big sword and other unrealistic, still not sure what he meant by this, features of my character really did bother him after all. He adds on that he might have expressed it on a whim in-game, and in a very bad way. He apologized for the treatment out of game and asked if I could stay as a player. Ultimately, I told him that I would give it another shot, mostly because I had become friends with everyone at the table, including Sorcerer and Billy himself. We were all pretty much the only employees at our company in the same 20-something-year-old age group, and these weekly sessions were a great way to get out of the house to meet up. I asked Billy if I could just roll up a new character since I felt like this one was pretty much done with. He said sure, and we went back inside. And yeah, that is the anticlimactic end of my adventures with the mighty swordsman Joram. He got sent to Fantasy Alcatraz, and I think eventually murdered in a prison riot. I do feel bad that his clan is now without a leader, but that little plot thread never came up again. Spoiler, only one person's backstory was ever actually explored in-game during the time I played with the group. I'll leave it open for whose it was. I think I will write one more post about this campaign and the various horrors that occurred after my new character, Ragu the Ranger, joined the party. Ragu the Ranger?
It's me, Ragu the Goliath Barbarian. I grab my axe and I whack the goblin, I whack the dragon, I whack the Bowser, but no matter what I do, he won't stop f***ing a peach.
I know what must be done. But that's a mountain we'll climb in part 3. Let's go ahead and reflect on part 2. Yeah, after maybe a whole half-second of deliberation, I've decided that I don't like Billy. You never want to solve out-of-game problems with proposed in-game solutions. Not only is Billy an absolute twat, but he's also a complete liar. Billy is guilty of trying to push a manufactured event onto his players. When I say a manufactured event, I'm referring to the phenomenon that happens all the time when a DM wants something to happen, but also wants to convince the players that their actions had something to do with making that thing happen. I've done this a few times, and I still feel guilty about it. The most obvious way is having a player roll repeatedly for something and make the DC impossibly high. But they may also try to pull some other underhanded tactics to make the players think that their actions had something to do with that thing happening. I need all aspiring DMs to listen to my words right now. This never works. Players are not as dumb as you might think. They know when they're being manipulated, and it never feels good to them. Want to know an alternative to creating manufactured events? Just say that the goddamn thing happens. Instead of trying to hide the fact that you want Joram to bump into the barmaid, just say, you bump into the barmaid. The player won't see it as annoying railroading, they'll see it as an opportunity for roleplay. Unlike a manufactured event where they'll just interpret it as you thinking that they're dumber than they really are. A manufactured event is railroading, but with glitter thrown all over it. Sure, the railroad is a bit prettier, but that's hardly a consolation to the player that's been tied to it and is about to get nailed by a locomotive going a bajillion miles an hour. So after forcing not one, but 2 manufactured events into existence, those being the barmaid conflict and the breaking of the sword, Billy's got the balls to stick to the tried and true no when he's accused of targeting OP, which he so very obviously did. Throw in a splash of player favoritism on top of once again trying to pull the Chris Hansen, how about you have a seat over here shtick. I have come to the expert and informed conclusion that Billy is kind of an asshole. But considering the fact that one final part of this story exists, I doubt that Billy has realized that himself. Now, if you'll all excuse me, I have a character named Ragu whose stupid accent I need to go dig up. Our third and final part is titled, GM thinks that player that is able to do anything at all is overpowered. Nerfs their character to the ground. So this is the third and probably last part of my horror story that took place in 2016. As a refresher, or for context, I'll link the first 2 parts below. As this will also probably be the longest part, seeing as it covers everything that happened until the campaign dissolved, I will apologize for the length in advance. TLDR at the bottom. To address the main comment I saw in my last 2 posts about why I didn't just leave the game, it's complicated. Part of it was probably due to not having the biggest backbone like some pointed out. We were all co-workers, so I didn't want the stigma of leaving a game hanging over my head at work. I thought of everyone at the table as good friends, and I had never left a gaming table due to negative reasons. Finally, I didn't have a good gauge on what my tolerance for bullshit between friends should be. All these reasons were the excuses that I made to myself. It's something that I had to learn the hard way, and I am glad that I did. I will not be making the same mistakes again. When we left off, Billy had apologized to me for the in-game actions that he took against my character, and asked if I would stay in the game along with the promise that he wouldn't do something like that again. To be completely fair to him, the game went great for a while after that incident. I rolled up a ranger named Ragu, and there were no further issues with targeting or being harassed by NPCs like my fighter had experienced. Looking back on it, I do remember that Billy had made another comment about me playing another male character, but it wasn't enough to trigger my radar like it had the first time. I came to the game as level 3, same as my fighter with the same XP, and we had about 6 to 7 months of really good sessions where nothing really bad happened. The game itself was going really smoothly, and there were some things that I genuinely liked about it. First, the rules Billy had at the table. While you could bluff other PCs or attempt to steal items from them, the one thing you could never do is influence their decisions. As an example, if a player tried to convince you to follow a specific plan and rolled a perfect diplomacy check against you, you always had the agency to disagree no matter what your opposed role was. The most that would happen is that your PC would think that the plan described to you was really good. I'm not sure if this is a rules as written or something Billy had just as a rule, but I liked it. The plot was pretty good, if not a little generic, and the metagaming previously shown by Sorcerer seemed to pretty much stop after Monk complained to Billy. There were a few issues early on, however. Although not horror by itself, something that always seemed to happen is when the party visited a new town, Sorcerer would get some magic item that previously belonged to her grandmother, Billy's wife's character from a different campaign. We would walk in and somehow an NPC would recognize and greet Sorcerer, spouting praises to the great Sorcerer who once saved the day. They would take Sorcerer to a vault, a chest, a shop, a bank, etc., and hand her the item. Now these items were good. Like, really good in some cases. But it didn't bother me too much. If Billy wanted to give his wife something to make her feel good and keep her power up, fine. The main issue with this is that the rest of the party was severely under-equipped. The first real signs of trouble came when the party was level 10. The start of one of our sessions, Billy introduced a new player, who we'll call Nathan. Nathan was one of Billy's high school friends who had just graduated from college and moved back home. Nathan was looking to join a game, so Billy invited him to ours. Once introductions were made, Nathan introduces his character, a Cavalier. Now, there were 3 main problems with Nathan and his Cavalier. First up, until now, we had only been allowed to use the core rulebook for everything, no exceptions. Billy explained that because the new players were now used to Pathfinder, he was opening up the game to include every book for people rolling new characters. He also told us that we could start taking feats, spells, and equipment from other books when leveling up. While this was a little annoying as we had already committed 10 levels worth of progression to core stuff only, overall the table was glad to have access to more stuff. As a side note, before talking about the second issue, Nathan is now a really good friend of mine. He's got a good sense of humor and is really respectful to people's boundaries. As an example, at the end of one of our sessions, he asked me out on some sort of lunch/dinner date, which I rejected. He didn't try to pursue it any further, and we continued in and out of game as if nothing happened. All that being said, the second issue was that playing with Nathan as Cavalier was awful. Not only did he bring in one of the most min-maxed creations I have ever seen, but most RP encounters would turn into combats if his character was involved. Nathan loved making himself involved. An example of this was when the party came across a traveling band being led by a lute-playing bard. Ragu started asking the bard about what cities they had traveled to, and what type of music they liked playing. All of a sudden, from the top of a hill, Nathan charged and ran his lance through one of the band members, initiating combat. When asked why he felt the need to murder a non-hostile group of musicians, Nathan responded with a shrug and said something along the lines of, "My backstory is that I hate music," or something. Finally, the third and biggest issue that started to become much more noticeable was our PC's wealth. When Nathan built his character, he got to buy nearly 70k worth of magic and non-magic items per the wealth by level table. Aside from Sorcerer and him, the rest of the party maxed out around maybe 6 to 7k worth of items and gold. Billy was notoriously stingy with loot. Apart from the cave we found when we were level 2, we never found another chest, or got a drop from an enemy that wasn't a 30 gold piece used weapon. Billy's reasoning for this was that he wanted us to make use of our surroundings and exploit natural resources around us, instead of relying on manufactured goods. He also said that if we did get magic items, they would feel much more special. To be fair, this is an interesting idea in theory, but in practice, it just wasn't consistent enough to get us close to where we should have been power-wise. On top of that, Billy used generated tables to determine what items shops had available. This was annoying to say the least. More often than not, finding a specific potion or magic item while shopping was literally impossible. If we did find something we wanted from the shop, it would cost 3 to 4 times more due to it not being manufactured in the region. If we did decide to buy the item at the marked up cost anyway, we would have to roll a diplomacy check to see if the shopkeeper was going to try to screw us over even more by increasing the price at the last second. Ragu might be the first character in Pathfinder's history to pay over 2,000 gold for a potion of enlarged person. Of course, he never got to use the potion due to Nathan stealing it out of his backpack the night after acquiring it. Combats were no longer fun for the majority of the party. At first, Nathan/Sorcerer would end the combats very quickly due to being significantly more powerful than the rest of the party. Although the rest of the party felt somewhat outclassed, we didn't see it as much of an issue, as we could still contribute something to the fights. Billy didn't think the same way as us, and instead opted to balance combat encounters around Nathan and Sorcerer. This made combat impossible for the rest of us. It got to the point where when combat would start, we would pray that enemies wouldn't target us during the first round so that we could run to cover and stay there the whole fight. If we were targeted, 90% of the time we would just get knocked out. Monk and Bard fared slightly better than me, but still had their own issues with the combat. After one of our sessions ended, Bard addressed the table and mentioned that he would like to bring another character to the next session. Billy said that it was fine and asked Monk if he would like to change characters as well, since it seemed like he wasn't having as much fun as normal. Monk said that he would like to, and mentioned that he was itching to try out a war priest. I asked if it was alright if I swapped character to something built more than just core, and Billy flatly and somewhat angrily refused. Monk spoke up before I could and asked,
Hey, why is she the only one not allowed to change characters?
To which Billy snapped back,
Because she already changed characters once.
Billy, Monk, and Bard argued back and forth a little before I asked if it would be alright if I just changed classes instead. Billy grumbled in agreement and said,
Yes, that would be fine, but you have to keep your abilities, skills, and feats as close to what you currently have as possible.
The following week over our work chat, I discussed with Billy what classes I could change into, and what stuff I would be allowed to swap around to make it work. I settled on an alchemist. In order to keep with Billy's request, I swapped out the feats I took from leveling up for the bow feats I got as a ranger. The only big change I had to make was swapping my wisdom and intelligence scores so I'd be able to take and use spells. Although the solution was very hacky, Billy approved of my new sheet, and I brought it to the next session. At the start of the session, Billy RP'd Ragu being captured and experimented on, resulting in him losing his connection with nature and unlocking the alchemist inside of him. One time skip later, and he joined the party with his new abilities in hand. Ragu was a bad alchemist, all things considered, but with all the buffs available to him, he became pretty deadly in combat after a few rounds setting up. On top of being able to fly and down a mutagen that greatly increased his stats, he could attach bombs to his arrows, which did a nice bit of damage with his composite bow. Monk and Bard even spent some of their starting wealth on items for Ragu, much to Billy's displeasure. Billy started to become noticeably irritated every time I did something interesting with my abilities to increase my attack. It started out small, like making me repeat math or asking where bonuses were coming from, and how I was applying everything to an attack roll. I was also starting to notice that at the start of every fight, every enemy would only target me while I was attempting to buff, completely ignoring the charging cavalier or the war priest in front of them. It got to the point where I was having to start every combat from the air. This caused Billy to throw a fit and mumble about how overpowered Alchemist's flight was, despite Sorcerer also starting most combats in the air using one of the magical items given to her. Monk, Bard, and even Nathan pointed out to Billy how silly that statement was, and how I wouldn't feel the need to do that if Ragu wasn't singled out every fight. The straw that finally broke the camel's back and caused myself, Monk, and Bard to quit the campaign for good occurred over the final 2 sessions. The party was traveling through a broken down temple when we were ambushed by one of the BBEG's armies. Off in the distance, Sorcerer noticed a lieutenant watching the action from afar. Billy described how he looked like he was taking note of our fighting styles, in what seemed like a report possibly going back to the BBEG's war headquarters. Billy mentioned how this guy looked like the perfect target for Sorcerer to hit, since she noticed that it looked like he was weak to fire, something that she could throw at him from a distance. Sorcerer relayed all this information back to us, and she said that she was going to try to take him out. Ragu shouted back that he would assist if her attack failed. Sorcerer said back, "Sure, but I'll have you know I never fail fire magic." Her attack hit, doing a good amount of damage and caused the lieutenant to fly over and pull out a weapon. He gave a quick monologue to Sorcerer about how many people could not hit him, and how she was going to be a worthy opponent. Ragu notched a bomb arrow and shouted, "Aye, she might be a worthy opponent, but she's not alone." My attack hit caused his HP to drop below 0. Sorcerer gave the falling body a peace sign. Out of character, the players laughed and threw around some comments about how cheesy my one-liner was. Billy, however, was pissed. He stopped the game and demanded that I explain how I was able to apply fire damage to my arrow using a non-magical composite bow. After explaining the bomb arrow ability and showing him the alchemist discoveries I took to enhance my bombs, the conversation turned into a mini argument. The session ended without ending the combat, and Billy asked everyone to leave their character sheets at his apartment so he can go over them in detail next week. The following week, Billy started the session by saying that he had an announcement.
So, after reviewing everyone's sheets, I noticed some pretty big discrepancies. A few numbers didn't add up, and a few people forgot to update things as they leveled up. I went ahead and fixed that. I also noticed that it appears that someone might have been cheating by increasing their ability scores between sessions. You know who you are, don't do it again.
Everyone at the table looked confused as Billy started handing sheets back. When he got to me, he gave a half smile and said,
"Yours was probably the most frustrating to fix."
The character sheet I got back was not even close to the one I left. Items that Monk and Bard had gifted me were completely removed, and most of the skills were a full 2 or 3 points lower than they were previously. My flying skill was marked down to a 0. A lot of my feats were crossed out, replaced with some of the previous feats I had as a ranger. The most egregious change was my intelligence and wisdom scores were reverted back to what they were prior to becoming an alchemist. Hey, why did you make these changes to my sheet? Specifically, why did you put my intelligence back to an 8?
Well, if you want to talk about it in front of the table, it's because you were the one who cheated. I looked at your ranger sheet, and this is how you had your ability scores. You can't just randomly swap them around as you see fit.
But we talked about this before I changed my class to alchemist. Oh, I would never have made the change if I couldn't.
No, we did not talk about this. I wouldn't have allowed it. I want you to keep playing with us like you were here, but you can't cheat like that to give yourself extra damage. Everyone here agrees that cheaters ruin the game for everyone.
Maybe you don't understand, but we talked about this over a work chat. It would make no sense for me to switch to this class. I would literally have no spells, no bombs, and lose the ability to do anything but fire a bow worse than any fighter or a ranger. I already was a shitty alchemist.
Then I guess you can't cast. Not my fault. I don't want to make this a big deal and cause a public scene about this, so we're going to drop this now. All right, everyone, let's pick up this combat where we left off.
And that was it. I didn't want the table to see my eyes tearing up or start crying in front of everyone, so I left the apartment and sat at the base of the stairs until Monk, who was my ride, came out a few minutes later with my stuff and drove me home. The game didn't have a next session, with most of the players saying how they were suddenly busy, too tired, or flat out didn't want to continue after the awkward scene. For a while, I avoided Billy during work as much as possible. Work life did return to normal by nobody bringing up the campaign or that night again. I left the company a few years after the campaign ended to move back to my hometown. I still keep up with Bard, Monk, and Nathan, all of whom helped me remember parts of this story while I was writing it. As for gaming, I took a long hiatus. Every time I thought about trying to find a new group, I would get anxious and be bombarded with negative feelings. During the virus of unknown origins, however, I got in contact with some of the players from my college days, and we started playing 5e online. We've been going strong ever since, and I even got to try my hand at GMing for the first time. So, overall, happy ending. Edit. One quick edit/update I want to make before this last post that is years later. I think the old players and I found out his issue with me. I'm a very tomboyish person outside of work. Think jeans and a hoodie/t-shirt. But during work, we had to dress business casual. Apparently, the DM was texting one of the other players, either Nathan or Bard, I can't remember which, that he didn't like how I dressed outside of work. He would also text somewhat creepy stuff to them about things that happened with me during work. This never happened while the game was still ongoing, but I like to think it had something to do with his treatment of me during the game. TLDR, Bully GM does not like me playing a male character, and makes it so I am constantly underpowered and useless in a fight. GM won't let me change characters, but does allow me to change classes. GM flips out after my character is able to win a fight and calls me a cheater. End of story. And thus concludes the saga of Billy the Bully. In addition to being a jerk, he was also a creep. Will wonders never cease? I think the thing that I dislike the most about Billy is his incessant use of doublespeak. He starts by saying,
"One of you is cheating. I won't say who it was or how, but I just want all of you to know that it was definitely Ragu."
Only for his slimy little ass to turn around and be like,
"Wow, I guess if you want to make this public, fine. But no, you can't talk to me privately about it either because you're a filthy cheater ruining my game and everyone agrees with me. Also, I don't want to make this into a scene, so we're gonna drop this now."
If you didn't want to make a scene, you're doing a pretty garbage job. Remember how I went on a tangent about manufactured events after part 2? Well, wouldn't you know it, it's come full circle and it turns out that literally every interaction with Billy is a manufactured event. It sucks because yes, I'm sure this was a pretty fun game to be in, and I know how good D&D can be until it isn't. But this whole dynamic with Billy being Billy wasn't ever gonna be sustainable. The reality was that Billy is the kind of guy who views his DM seat as a throne, and his party as his adoring subjects. And when one of the peasants get out of line, it's his duty as king to bring the wrath of holy God down upon them so they know exactly what a bad girl they've been. It's toxic, it's irritating, and worst of all, it's how you end up on my channel. So, thanks, Billy. Here's hoping you quit creeping on women you work with and maybe try a different hobby. Speaking of being thankful for regrettable things, we have a fan art submission this week. That's right, how about we take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake? This week's fan art comes from viewer The Whelp, and depicts some comical implications brought about by the owner of this channel being too lazy to pin down the Drake's canonical size. But I will say, the evidence is pretty damning. Drake's actual size. Larry the Kobold is probably 2.5 feet according to the 3.5 Monster Manual. Drake is maybe a foot taller in this video. Therefore,
Drake is both small and adorable. He deserves hugs and snuggles for his cringe hoarding. It's a tough job. Who's my buddy?
Help! Help! I'm being abducted! Stranger danger!
Thank you again, The Whelp, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.